But right now, we're going to stop down for an installment with my friend Del Pullen. This is called First Impressions. Welcome, Del Pullen, back to the show. We are going to review the first episode of two TV series, one a classic and one contemporary. Welcome back to the show, Del.
Glad to be back, James. Thank you very much.
All right, so for our first show, we are going to go to the classic show SCTV. Now, I have seen some episodes of this throughout syndication every once in a while. I'm not that familiar with it. I know it has like Rick Moranis and John Candy and a couple of the people you would recognize in it. I've always thought this is the Canadian version of Saturday Night Live. It's either this or Kids in the Hall. But starting off, what does SCTV even stand for?
So SCTV stands for Second City Television. Second City is an improv comedy group that's been around for quite a while. And the show ran from 1976 to 1984. And you're right, very famous people like John Candy, Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hare, Dave Thomas, Harold Ramis, the guy who played Egon in Ghostbusters,
right,
directed that and Groundhog's Day. And later Rick Moranis was on the show as well. And if you're a fan of the show Strange Brew, the movie, that came from this TV show with Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas.
So how's the first episode? Is it terrible?
It is, like all first episodes of most shows. It is, and of course it's, so the basic premise is it's a sketch comedy show that takes place at a television station. It has fake soap operas, fake commercials, financial shows, news programs where the newscasters fight, commercials like where Catherine O'Hare does a speaking course. John Candy has a exercise show where he's smoking and eating the entire time. And of course, Johnny Candy being overweight, that's the joke. It's still funny, still kind of holds up, especially back in 1976 when this first came out. You know, humor really hadn't been invented yet. Humans were still figuring out jokes and humor. And this is, you know, for the time, pretty good. A lot of famous faces doing some good stuff.
Right, but you have to put that qualifier in there, for the time, pretty good. It was so weird how bad comedy was before about the 70s.
Yeah, it really was. Until we got a handle on some really, really good stand-up. And we fixed some television. Yeah, you know, like you were saying, it kind of reminds you of a Canadian version of SNL. That's true. It's definitely rougher than SNL. Lorne Michaels definitely had a more polished name, but he was able to look at shows like this. You know, of course, Lorne Michaels threw his Kids in the Hall. Then we have things like The State and Whitest Kids You Know. But this was one of the earliest televised sketch comedy shows, you know, barring things like Monty Python and, you know, the 1926 show and Q5 and stuff like that. This was.
So the other show that we're going to do has a connection here because you mentioned Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, and
correct.
Modern generations, current generations will know them better from the show that they just wrapped up not too long ago called S Words Creek. If it's a bad word, it sounds like a bad word. I know it's spelled different. We just can't say it on the radio because we can't.
Got it. For the episode, we're going to call it Ships Creek, like a nice boat out there. Ships Creek.
Can we stick with like Feces Creek or Stool Creek? Because that's still close.
Crap Creek. Yeah, and here's the thing. It's funny enough, when Eugene pitched it to the Canadian Television Network, both shows were Canadian, by the way, the network shot it down because of the name, and Eugene Levy had to bring them phone books and be like, look, dozens of people have this name before CNC would actually approve it to be on the air with that name. But that show is it's a comedy. It's a narrative show run for 6 seasons. First episode is Our Cup Runneth Over, and basically it's about a rich family called the Roses, whose business manager steals all their money, and they get kicked out of their house and their illustrious lifestyle, and they have to go live in a town called Poops Creek, and which they purchased as a joke back in 1991. And Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara play husband and wife of Johnny and Moira Rose. And Eugene's real-life son, Dan Levy, also co-created the show with Eugene and was the showrunner for most of it and did a lot of the writing. He plays the son, David, in the show, and Alexis is their daughter. And they're all socialites that now have to live in a two-bedroom motel in a crappy little town.
So this is the opposite of Beverly Hillbillies. This isn't super poor people who are now thrust into this rich situation. This is super rich, effete, sophisticated people who are now thrust to living at the bottom of the barrel in a tiny town in the middle of nowhere. I saw every episode of it. I think it's a great show. The first episode, though, was that any good?
Oh, I will say this: the first 4 episodes are hard, but that's because the characters are so unlikable. But they have to be for the growth for the next 5 seasons. And I will say this: it's one of my favorite shows of the past decade. The pilot is rough. I can tell you, get through the first half of the first season because the important part is the characters' growth in this town, and they have to start somewhere to grow. But it is a little rough. But yes, this is absolutely one of my favorite things I've seen in a long, long time. These have such realistic characters that are also incredibly funny.
And if you didn't already love Catherine O'Hara, you will love her after the Moira character. She's the best. All right, and both of these,
she's a special treasure, and of course Eugene Levy's eyebrows.
Both of these are recommended.
Highly, yes. Right now, Schitt's Creek, it's got me there, is on Netflix, and SCTV is available actually on YouTube on Canuck TV channel. All
right, thank you very much. This has been Del Pullen with First Impressions. Coming up next, I have the horrible, god-awful, scary history of Leap Day. Coming up next on The James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3.